Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I am Lindsay Bass. I am co-lead of the mental health work stream for the Diversity Project, and I am so delighted to be hosting this webinar for the Diversity Project. So thank you all for sparing an hour of what I think will be a really invaluable use of your time as we address a really deeply serious but important issue. Now, this event is anchored around International Men's Day, and there is an internationally selected theme of zero male suicide. Now, many of you don't even realise or understand why there is an International Men's Day, and a few years back I was definitely in the same boat. But when you really start to consider the negative impact of patriarchal systems and what they can have on men, and particularly recognise that suicide is the biggest killer of men under 50, then you really understand why this is an important topic to address. Now, we talk a lot about allyship in the Diversity Project and across DEI more generally, and that really cuts all ways. It's on all of us to identify and call out situations that can limit other people's success. So on that note, I will shortly be handing over to an excellent and intentionally all-male panel for this discussion that will be very ably led by Nathan Adams, Chief People Officer at Aviva Investors. Now, just before I hand it over, just a couple of points I wanted to cover off first. Firstly, I wanted to flag that we are absolutely thrilled to announce that Stuart White, CEO of HSBC Asset Management, who is also one of our panelists today, is going to be executive sponsor for the mental health work stream on the Diversity Project, and is really going to be helping us guide our thinking and driving forward change as we support our member firms across mental health provision. Secondly, we are also launching today our fabulous resource tool on the mental health section of the Diversity Project website. So this allows members to find really great resources of service providers to help support them through their mental health provision for their employees. Now, this is going to be an organically growing tool. So if you have any suggestions of great service providers that you use that aren't yet on there, please do let us know. We'll be very happy to get them added. This is really all about sharing good practice and knowledge amongst us all. So back to today. There will be a recording of today's session that will be made available afterwards. So please do share this widely amongst your colleagues, anyone that isn't able to attend today. Frankly, in my view is if we can help just one person with the consequence of today's conversations, I will take that as a huge win. And my final housekeeping point is that you are all muted. This is just a directional webinar, but if you have any questions, please put them into the Q&A section of the Zoom. Ideally Q&A rather than chat, because it'll just be easier to manage, and we will try to address them either as we go along or some time at the end. So thank you for that. And now, without any further ado, I will hand over to Nathan. Nathan.
Excellent. Thank you, Lindsay, and good afternoon or good morning around the world for those joining us. Absolute pleasure and my privilege actually to be facilitating this panel today. You will see in front of you four very esteemed individuals who are really going to bring different perspectives to this conversation. Some of the conversations that we will cover today, obviously under the zero male suicide topic, but how do you engage men, and what does the right support networks look like? How can you help males open up in this area so they don't feel alone and they also feel it's a safe space? And is there a challenge around the language that we use? Why are we, heavily focused on well-being but still seeing high numbers of male suicide? So there'll be some of the topics that we'll cover. Look, personally, I'm really passionate about this. Early in my career, I suffered a period of stress, and I learned a lot about myself through that period, and learned that opening up and talking to those around you is really invaluable. But also, secondly, from the role that I do here at Aviva Investors, I know this is an area of mental health and male suicide, which is an area of focus for us. And we actually ran some internal webinars last year and panels internally, and we had a brilliant reaction to some of the stories there. So I'm really hopeful that other people, as Lindsay said, if one person comes off this call today with feeling that they are in a different space, that will be a brilliant success. So look, without further ado, I'm going to ask each of the panel to introduce themselves, give a bit of their perspective, and then we'll move into Q&A. So first of all, I'd like to hand over to Stuart.
Nathan, thank you. And again, really appreciate being invited today. And I would just like to thank Lindsay, Manish, and the entire Diversity Project's mental health work stream, and it's an honour to be the executive sponsor. So just in terms of my background, I'm the Chief Executive Officer of HSBC Asset Management in the UK, but I also have the privilege of leading our diversity, equity, inclusion programme globally for the firm. And I actually also chair the mental health and wellness work stream within my company. And it's a subject that's very close to my heart. And maybe just to give you a short version of the story, which actually became quite public earlier on this year. I grew up in Manchester, so I'm a northerner, one of 5 brothers, and we didn't talk about our feelings. We were very competitive. We played sport. That's the way we were brought up. And actually, it was only later on in life that I discovered that actually all 5 of us have suffered with mental health over the course of our lives, stress, anxiety, depression. But we didn't talk about that. And in fact, the catalyst for me now talking about this, which is very alien to my younger self, if I was thinking back, is an experience that I had in 2017. I have a beautiful wife and 2 beautiful daughters. My oldest daughter at the time was 17 years old, and she sadly tried to commit suicide 3 times in 2 weeks. And it was clearly an incredibly traumatic experience for her and for the family. And as parents, we had no idea what we were doing. We got tremendous help from the NHS. But the way I reacted was to bottle things up and really to almost go into myself and actually throw myself into work, which was clearly not helping my wife, my daughter, my family. And it took a colleague at work actually to spot that something wasn't quite right. I think part of the challenge in these situations is we tend to put on a mask. And there were cracks that showed through. And the colleague, it was a life-changing moment, quite frankly. I then sought help. We have an employee assistance program, which I'm sure many of you do through your companies. And I had support through that over a series of a couple of months. It really helped. I could then help my family, help my daughter. Unfortunately, she continued to self-harm for another 2 years, which was very traumatic, but we had the help and the therapy together as a family. And the good news, and there is a positive part of this story, she is now a 4th-year medical student at Manchester University, en route to become a doctor and to practice and give back, given her lived experiences around mental health. That is her path in life, and we're incredibly proud of her. So I publicly spoke about this internally within HSBC Asset Management a couple of years ago, and then it got picked up in the press. And now I'm very open, with my family's permission, to talk about this, to create an environment where it is safe to talk about mental health, to destigmatize this. It's not a blocker to a career. We're all humans and we go through different phases in life, and to be there to help each other. So for me, it's been a very scary but rewarding experience, and I would encourage anyone to seek help when they need it, and to also check out the signs of those who are suffering. So very long-winded start, so apologies for that, Nathan, but I just wanted to share the reason I'm here today.
Well, I think firstly a huge thank you, Stuart, for sharing that story. I think probably like everybody on this call, you can't help but feel touched by you explaining that and your personal experience there. And there'll be lots of questions, and I've got some in my head, and I'm sure others will. So we will definitely dive into it shortly. Mark, I was going to flick to you next, just to sort of give your perspective and share your story.
Thank you, Nathan, and Stuart. Thank you for sharing that. To be honest, I have no real personal experience here. My family haven't suffered mental health challenges, and nobody close to me has ever committed suicide. I don't have the experience of James and Dan, who are going to follow, who are mental health experts. But I'm a passionate guy. I run an organization called Men for Inclusion and have been working in the space of gender equality for 25 years. In my work with Men for Inclusion, I suddenly realize the correlation between more inclusive societies, more inclusive workplaces, and improved and better mental health for men. And that inclusive workplaces allow men to throw off the sort of outdated, old-fashioned male stereotypes that our fathers and us, and even today, our sons have to comply with. But we're freer now than we've ever been to be able to throw off those stereotypes. We do have support infrastructures around us, like the one Stuart talked about at HSBC, and just mates and friends who we can now talk to in a completely different way and confide in a completely different way than we've historically been able to do. So in summary, there's a correlation between inclusivity and better mental health, as well as a whole bunch of other great outcomes for men.
Excellent. Thank you, Mark. And I am definitely sure we're going to pick up on some of those thoughts and correlations as we go through. Dan, I'd love to bring you in to give your perspective.
Thanks, Nathan. So I'm Dan, I'm practice manager with Onebright Mental Health. I guess my background's as a mental health nurse. I've worked in the sector for around the last 18 years or so, kind of both pre and post qualification, across a wide variety of services, really, from kind of inpatient to acute community services, psychiatry, and talking therapies. And I guess as well as having my own lived experience of depression and anxiety, I've also encountered suicide on both a personal and a professional level, really, which is at various times affected me in different ways. It's affected colleagues in different ways. It's affected friends and families and family members in different ways as well. So really pleased to be here just to continue opening up that conversation. And I really would echo Lindsay's point as well, that if by kind of having these discussions, if we can help one person, then that's an incredible win.
Excellent. Thank you, Dan. And finally, James, it would be great to hear your story as well.
Thanks, Nathan, and thank you for inviting me to be part of this really important conversation today. I'm James from Stress Matters. We are a B Corp certified workplace wellbeing organisation. So we basically help to try and make employee wellbeing easy for the clients that we work with. We do that through lots of different types of programs, initiatives, training, coaching, all of that kind of stuff. And I look after all of the mental health programs that we run. So I'm a qualified mental health first aid instructor, and I help businesses integrate that kind of training into their workplaces to actually make it work, rather than just kind of be a tick box activity. And I ended up doing this role in the same way that a lot of people, I feel, kind of land in the well-being and mental health area, and that was through my own experience of recovery from, in my experience, it was depression, anxiety, suicide behavior. And it was on that journey of recovery from those things that I kind of realized my purpose, the thing that I really wanted to do, which was to try and prevent the kind of things that happened to me happening to other people in the workplace. And obviously, being a male going through that, I've got a unique perspective. I say unique to obviously half of the population, but kind of really listening to Dan, Mark, and Stuart sort of could really can really relate to some of those experiences in either my own experience or the experiences that I've seen and heard from lots of people that have been on my programs and training. So I think this is a really, really important conversation to be having, and looking forward to the rest of the panel conversation.
Excellent. Thank you, James. And I might just stay with you actually for the first question. the statistics around male suicide are trending negatively, and there's been a lot of discussion about, look, we keep talking about this, but it's not really changing. It'd just be great to get your view on, how and can we do more? Where should we do more? And how do we move it to action? And is the conversation in this powerful enough on its own? And if not, what else?
Yeah, I think that's a really important question. And I think initially we need to kind of try and understand, why is it that we are talking more about it, but everything's kind of going in the wrong direction? And I think recently there's been a large focus on a lot of marginalized groups, and I'm not saying we should take focus away from those at all. But I think sometimes males are seen as kind of this privileged group historically, and organizations are a little bit worried sometimes about putting a focus on helping males, even though the statistics around male suicide are obviously awful. I think organizations very often will be scared of not putting enough focus on other sort of focused days and weeks throughout the year, and it's much easier to kind of ignore the male side of things than it is a lot of the other sort of groups. I don't know what other people feel about this, but I think from my perspective, whenever I'm working with organizations, the focus on male suicide and helping males specifically tends to be far lower down the list compared to other focuses. Not sure what other people's experience of this is.
It might be a great point, Mark, for you to jump in. I know you do lots of work across all sectors and organisations on allyship. So,
thanks, Nathan. Yeah, so James, I agree with you entirely. I think a significant number of men that we talk to are feeling that now they're the marginalised group within organisations. And whilst statistically, that's not correct. If people have got that perception and that feeling of being left out and not cared about, and the bad ones as well, we hear a lot of talk about, the abhorrent male behaviours. And I think that can often drive men in the wrong direction, to become resistant, to close down, to go in the opposite direction to the one we want them to go in. So yeah, I think we do need more of a all gender or all of us conversation, rather than this sort of putting people into diversity boxes and forgetting the one with the most people in it.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Mark. Yeah, it's that balance between making sure the conversation covers everybody from an inclusion perspective, and every voice counts across the spectrum. Yeah. A brilliant question has come in, which is, how do you open up to long-term partners and discuss mental health issues at home when you feel like you're the rock in the relationship? Anybody? Stuart, maybe you might want to start on that one, if anybody else wants to jump in. You're on mute, Stuart. Sorry.
Yeah, it was very difficult, actually. It was a journey for me. Again, I grew up in a very traditional background where we didn't talk about our feelings, as I said. And I didn't even open up to my partner about the stresses that I was having over the years. I got married when I was 28. It wasn't until I was, I guess, in late 40s that I really started to recognize and be open about the fact that I was suffering, and it took the catalyst of quite a traumatic experience for me to open up. In hindsight, I wish to goodness I'd opened up sooner, and I think this is part of sort of paying forward as older individuals in the industry, where you can sort of share what's worked, what hasn't worked for you, and one thing that I found very powerful within our own firm is groups coalescing around certain themes of mental health and wellness, whether it's suicide, whether it's anorexia, whether it's ADHD, whatever it may be, that impacts particularly children, and how older parents can help younger parents who are just starting on that journey. So everyone's got to find their own pace, but I think we're in a society increasingly that is much more open. And going back to Mark's point and James's, I feel now that being open about your mental health is not seen as a negative. It's not seen as a stigma. In fact, in many ways, it's seen that you've built resilience over the years. Certainly, I'm very comfortable in talking about this publicly and supporting and promoting people that I see in the organisation who have similar stories to tell.
Excellent. Thank you, Stuart. I don't know, Dan, maybe a clinical perspective on this question.
Yeah, and I think going back to one of the points earlier, I think what's really key in this and right across the subject really is I guess that theme of individuality, that everybody is their own person, and some people will feel much more comfortable in opening up than others, and in a variety of different ways as well. So whether that's kind of at home, in the workplace, with friends, around a specific theme, and I guess that can feel really uncomfortable for some of us if it's a new experience, if it's something that we're not used to doing. It can be a kind of a scary first step. So I think really just kind of encouraging those conversations, having these conversations that we're having now, really kind of broaching the subject and normalizing it, really kind of can really help in kind of encouraging people to take those first kind of baby steps and kind of judge how comfortable they feel in various situations and help kind of bridge that gap.
Excellent.
I'll just very quickly add, one thing that I talk about a lot is in our courses and training is not being able to fill from an empty cup, okay, and getting people to recognize that you are not doing your family any favors by bottling this all up, because eventually you might become a burden to them. Eventually you can't be the rock because you're not in a good place yourself. So kind of switching this idea on its head that you have to come first. Self-care is not selfish. You need to fill your own cup up first in order to be a good parent, a good colleague, a good friend, family member, whatever it is you want to be. You must come first. So actually opening up and saying, I am struggling, I need help, is not being selfish. In fact, it's selfish not to, because eventually you could become a burden, to those other people that you're trying to protect by not telling them. So it doesn't make sense.
Excellent. Thanks, James. And maybe that actually is a nice lead into the next question, which so how does poor mental health manifest in men? What are the triggers? What are the signs that either you have all seen in yourselves or working with other people across your organisations?
So I can come in on that one quickly, Nathan, because I guess in terms of when we think about especially kind of stress and low mood and what have you, everybody probably has their own perceptions of kind of how that manifests or the symptoms that people may experience. And I think it's quite interesting in terms of how that presents in the male population as well. So for example, men might present with more symptoms such as irritability, possibly even aggression or sudden anger sometimes, kind of maybe around loss of control and maybe kind of increased risk-taking behaviours. And I guess when we think about some of the I guess what we call negative coping strategies kind of associated with anxiety and depression, like alcohol use, substance use, and what have you, I guess that can really kind of come into that as well. And I guess kind of some of the common symptoms, kind of even kind of difficulties with memory. People kind of talk about a fogginess, if you like, things like experiencing physical pain, fatigue as well. And interestingly, kind of going back to, I think this was something that Stuart mentioned before, in terms of kind of, I guess, escapism. So even kind of throwing yourself into work and into the day job, kind of keeping that mind kind of occupied with other things that that take us away from the reality, and those feelings that we're having at that point are all, I guess, can all be things to kind of take into account.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, it feels like a bit of a reoccurring theme, this to throw yourself into something, right? Whether it be work or a hobby or something to sort of avoid getting into the actual conversation. There's a few questions in the Q&A that have come that are fairly similar. So, touching on the sort of lack of engagement proactively from sort of males, whether that's individuals or cohorts, and it almost has to become a problem, or it's sort of spiraled out of control, or is about to spiral out of control before then the sort of the opening up comes, whether that's, you know, forced or natural. And, you know, Stuart, you sort of said, look, just open up sooner is your, I think, sort of tagline. How can we help males, you know, sat on today's call or others outside of it, do that sort of first step? What's sort of a practical mechanism? Stuart?
I think, yeah, just maybe to start, and I mean, for me, I use the analogy of a car. You know, we have an annual MOT for our cars. You know, most of us will have annual health checks, physical health checks, in terms of you know, how we are. You know, why on earth aren't we doing mental health checks, not just on an annual basis, but on a more regular basis? And, you know, but for me, it's well-being in its you know, in its entirety, and you know, I think, you know, creating an environment, whether it's at work or whether it's at home, where it's okay to be open and authentic, and it's okay to share without a concern of consequence. I think that's the starting point, particularly in our organisations that we work for, is to set that tone from the top, to create a framework where colleagues know where to go, whether it's EAP programs, whether it's their line manager, whether it's mental health first aiders, and quite frankly, just education, spotting the signs, you know, that Dan just mentioned. Are people more irritable than normal? You know, are they quieter than normal? Are they not going out to, you know, socially when they might normally do? And just sort of spotting those signs. And it's not just for men, it's for anyone in the organisation. And creating that culture where this is normal. You know, we should just be checking in on an annual basis, checking in on a monthly, weekly basis, checking every day. I mean, it should be part of, you know, how our cultures have evolved in our industry. So I'll stop there.
Thanks, Stuart. Mark, do you want to follow up from that?
Yeah, I think it's important to understand, particularly men in the workplace. We haven't had a very good reputation, and also that's kind of made us put our head in the sand a little bit. And what I think is missing, we've had great female role models in our working lives for a number of years now. But great male role models who are role modeling inclusive behaviors, who are you know, Stuart, amazing, talking openly and discussing this openly in the way he has. It's not something that men are good at, but role models like Stuart enable other men to follow in your shoes, Stuart. And now, whether that's mental health or inclusive behaviors or other things, I think it is about actually bringing men into the room with a positive message, and having positive discussions along the lines that we're having today, that actually meant this is good for you. You know, this is, you know, inclusion is good for you. It gives you better mental health. let's have positive discussions, but let's have positive role models and culture carriers who are helping and supporting along the way. That's what we had, with our female colleagues in breaking glass barriers and breaking into traditional male roles. We need something the other way.
Brilliant point. Thank you, Matt. Yeah, I love that idea of learning off the female role models in this space in how to approach it and open up the conversations. One, James, it'd be great to get your view. One of the questions that sort of come through is along the lines of, but what happens if the individual just doesn't open up? So you do the check-in that Stuart described. You're a good leader. You're being inclusive. You are sensing something's not right. You obviously speak to lots of people in this sort of area. So what's the tips there if people are faced with that situation?
Good question. The main thing is to keep trying. Yeah, don't hassle them, but keep trying in different ways. Very often, people won't open up because they don't think that help is available, that they don't think they'll be listened to, that they don't think their problems are important enough. So we need to, first of all, actually assure them that all of those things are not true, that help is available, that you are there to listen, that things can get better. And sometimes it's only in those kind of environments that somebody will be comfortable enough, particularly guys, to open up. And very often guys may have tried opening up in the past, particularly to other guys, and then because other people don't know how to listen, they get shut down, and then they feel even more shame and embarrassment and stigma, and then it reduces their chances of opening up in the future. So we need to try and overcome that. And that's where mental health first aid is a really great skill to have, because it teaches you exactly how to do that, exactly how to highlight the concern in a way to somebody and show them that you are going to listen non-judgmentally and that help is available, and that's a skill that not many people have, and that we need a lot more of in workplaces in particular. But my kind of top tips, apart from getting mental health first aid qualified, would be to keep try different times of the day, different methods of approaching the issue, and also highlight the problem that you've actually noticed as well. So rather than just saying, "Hey, James, are you okay?" knowing that they probably aren't, the chances are you're just going to get a reply back saying, "Yeah, I'm okay. Yeah, no, honestly, I'm fine." Yeah. Instead, saying to them, "Hey, James, I'm concerned about you. I've noticed," and then talk about the concerning behavior or change in behavior that you actually have noticed, and try to do that multiple times in different ways. And then you're far more likely to get a response that is along the lines of, "Actually, I'm not feeling that great. I don't know what to do about it," and then you can actually have a real conversation. Oh, you're on mute, Nathan.
I knew it would get me at some point, and there it was. I got halfway through at least. Thank you, James. Look, I'd like to sort of open up to some examples that you've sort of helped either across an organisation or within your organisation. Some of the initiatives that you've done to support men. What reactions have you got to those? What's worked well? What hasn't? To share with the participants. Anybody want to take that first?
I'm happy to, Nathan. So in terms of the diversity, equity, inclusion program, we've actually modelled it very much on the back of the diversity project. So we have 11 work streams and 3 enabling work streams, and one of the key philosophies through the whole program is around allyship. So we have many men supporting the gender equity work stream as an example. We also have, as I say, a mental health and wellness work stream, which is pretty balanced actually between male and female colleagues. We've got about 300 volunteers now across 15 countries who are involved actively in these work streams. And the way we think about it is at 3 levels. So the first level is effectively the regulator and the athlete owner community. Clearly are taking this very seriously now, which is great. The FCA have come out with a consultation recently. Asset owners through the diversity project actually have increasingly signed up to the Asset Owner Diversity Charter. So now 23 of the largest pension schemes are driving DE&I through into the mandates they put out by consultants to managers. So there's that level. There's clearly the level of asset managers are firms and people on the call today. How do we improve the profiles within our firms? And clearly, if we have an open culture and we spot these signs, it's the right thing to do. It creates authenticity, but it also has a commercial benefit. We're not losing people from the workplace. People are working effectively and efficiently. And then the final level, of course, is how we invest as organizations. How do we engage with underlying investee companies through our ESG integration, and then engage with those companies to improve their profile around D&I, including mental health and wellness. What are the programs they have in place? How effective are those programs in terms of sick leave as a measure, as an example? And clearly, all of this leads, if organizations get it right, to better performance, better financial performance, better investment performance, and it flows all the way back up the value chain, the asset owner. So for me, this is now critical for our industry, and we have the power of capital to drive this change on behalf of the asset owners that we manage money for. So I'm really positive. I'm seeing a lot of very strong engagement coming through around D&I, but around mental health, around areas such as neurodiversity, around all aspects, because mental health is intersectional. It cuts across all elements of D&I. So just to share that, this is how we think about mental health in the round across the asset owner, the asset manager, the investee company.
Excellent, thank you, Stuart. And I know, for my own organisation, very, very similar thought process. So that's great to hear that that a lot of us in this area are aligned. And actually linked to that, and I don't know whether you want to take this or if anybody else is. Somebody sort of boiled it down to say, look, financial markets, investments, large amount of stress, large amount of pressure on individuals managing in those areas. How do we let how do we help men and women, I would say on this one, open up about the anxiety and, feeling like, well, maybe if I open up on this, maybe I'm not seen as fit for the role because, I'm showing a weakness, or I'm showing a sign here that is perceived, counter to what financial markets or investment roles are supposed to feel like.
Yeah, I mean, maybe just to start, and a lot of my colleagues and friends to jump in. I mean, for me, we're in a privileged position where we have this capital opportunity to drive change. Now, clearly, it's for financial returns for our unit holders, our shareholders, our policyholders, our members of this pension scheme. We have this opportunity, and for me, that is a real privilege, and is something we should be proud of, and we should use that very carefully. So I think that's probably the first point. I think as in terms of pressure in the industry, again, it's creating a culture where you're recognizing that it's okay to be open about these things, because then you will get the best out of the individual, and you will get their best performance in terms of coming to the workplace or working from home and delivering, rather than the crash and burn scenarios where people just go for it, bottle things up, and then crash. And I've done it myself. That's not good for the individual. It's not good for the team, for the company, or for the underlying investment performance if you're a portfolio manager. So I think this makes sense when you start talking about it very logically. And when you destigmatize mental health and wellness, and you recognize that actually, if we get this right, we're going to be growing our business. We will be winning mandates. We will be getting better performance. We'll have a happier workplace. I mean, this is all utopia, and that there is clearly there's a long way to go. But if we incrementally start down that journey, it's going to be better for all, whether you're male, female, at any level in the organisation. So, and I have the same view of any aspect of D&I. You know, the more we embrace all aspects, the more successful we will be as an organisation, the more opportunities there will be for colleagues. So that's my perspective.
Fantastic. I don't know, Mark, do you want to jump in?
Yeah.
You've come across this.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one, isn't it? I mean, there are plenty of industries where you're in physical danger. Yeah, mining, lorry driving, whatever it is. You know, working in factories, and you know, health and safety regulations have been put in place to ensure that, you know, you're as safe as you can be when you're working in those places. You know, mental health is just as important, if not more important. Yet, you know, we don't seem to address it in the same way. There's a stigma that Stuart's spoken about. You know, as an industry, you know, we're working in high stress environments, often long hours, often under, you know, significant pressure to perform. We need, you know, as an industry and as organizations to put and think about this as a health and safety issue, and put those mechanisms in place to ensure that, you know, frankly, you know, we're not injuring our colleagues and our staff. I'd be interested to know what James and Dan, you do this on a daily basis. Sorry to take out for facilitation, Nathan, but you know, what are people doing? What are you seeing in this space?
I think the first thing we have to do is overcome the barriers, and until we do that, the initiatives that we put in place aren't going to work, because we've seen so many times organizations say, right, we're going to do this, we're going to create a men's support network. Well, guess what? If the barriers are still there, no men will join that men's support network, especially if that's what it's called as well. Yeah. So often we see organizations just jump to, right, here's the problem. Like, we know what the problem is. Let's do this as a solution. And then they go, oh, no one's engaging in it. Well, okay, no surprise there. So you need to understand what the actual barriers are first, overcome them. And then the initiatives that we put into place are going to be far more effective. So, for example, we need to see, you know, guys need to see that it's safe to talk. It's all well and good saying that they need to talk and putting that awareness and communication out. That's a good first step. But until they know that it's safe to, that if they do talk, this isn't going to be used against them. Yeah, until that is in place, they're not going to. So we need to see senior male people talking openly themselves about their own experiences. And Stuart, you're a fantastic example of that. So that other people can see that, okay, it's safe to, this won't be used against me if I do, you know. So that's one thing we need to do. We also need to consider the language that we use around mental health, and particularly when we're trying to target males to talk more openly or engage into initiatives. If we're talking about mental health and well-being, typically guys tend to picture, you know, yoga and candles and things like this, and don't necessarily associate with that. But instead, if we kind of talking about you know, accountability groups and high performance groups, and if we talk about it in a slightly different language, guys are far more likely to get on board. So I think we need to understand the problem, remove the barriers, and then put in place the initiatives in order to get proper engagement, in order to achieve all of the things that we've been talking about so far.
Yeah, that's a brilliant point. Go on, Dan.
I'm just going to say, I mean, I completely echo that, James, and especially in terms of kind of the role modeling that we've talked about before, and kind of leaders and senior leaders within an organization, kind of leading by example in terms of kind of opening up about that stress or kind of difficulties at work. And I think that goes for other initiatives as well. So I mean, we do see kind of organizations now kind of implementing kind of wellbeing initiatives amongst their employees, which is great. But I guess it's around permission giving as well to use those initiatives. So there may be a social or an exercise group, for example, on lunchtime, but without that kind of permission from senior leaders to engage with those, to see those people engaging with those initiatives as well. I think we need to see more of that to encourage that more across the board.
Sorry, just to very quickly add on that. I would go one step further and say it's more than permission. Like, actually, if we're really creating cultures if we're really wanting to create cultures in our organizations that are kind of proactive about well-being, it should be less about permission and more about expectation. Like, we expect you to do these things in order to look after your own well-being and talk openly and raise awareness and all this kind of stuff. This is what we expect of you, and that should be kind of incentivized. And kind of, if we really kind of go that far, then we start to drive a culture of well-being that is self-sustaining and actually incentivized, that people do that as part of their career progression and everything else that comes with working in that environment and for that organization.
Just picking up on a thread you both mentioned there, really, the sort of language feels like it's now actually really important, right? So, you know, resilience, well-being, you mentioned in different ways. What's the panel's advice on how do you get that language right so that it attracts males in to feel comfortable and open up, but also makes it inclusive for others as well?
I think on that. Oh,
no, go on, Dan. Off to you.
I was just going to say on the topic of language, I think is a really big one, and again, it has some subjectivity to it, doesn't it? In terms of kind of who engages with what. I think it's really interesting, kind of the language we use across the board as well. There's a really powerful TEDx video, which I think you'll be able to find on YouTube, with Jane Powell, who founded CALM, the campaign against living miserably, and she talks about some of the barriers in terms of supporting male mental health, splits them into attitudes and sexism as well. So she talks quite a lot about I guess the progress that we've made as a society in terms of the language we use, in terms of I guess how women or may have been spoken about in previous generations, and what have you, and how much progress we've made on that, but that we maybe haven't with males, and kind of the man up or grow up hair being kind of so much more commonly still accepted as acceptable language that's used these days. And so I know that's kind of digressed a little from the original question, but I think just language in general is so important, and it's something that we need to be thinking about as a society, within organizations, and really actually is it okay to say that? How does that make the person on the end of that comment feel? And really kind of keeping that in mind.
Yeah, it's a great point. As a fellow northerner, I'll just man up. got thrown in my way a lot. I'm sure, Stuart, you probably experienced that
exactly. Exactly. I mean, I think it was James who mentioned, rather than the accountability group is something that sort of jumped out. So rather than the language of a support group, it's something which is very proactive. And then the way I think about it is sort of the left and right hand side of the brain. We often think of mental health and wellness as sort of the EQ side, which is it's around well-being, it's around empathy, and sort of getting in tune with your feelings, and sort of the antithesis of manning up. The other side of the brain is the IQ side. In many ways, if we get this right, as I've described, it's about productivity, it's around efficiency, it's around profitability, it's around so I think if we can use both sides in terms of narrative, maybe it will become certainly will resonate more with certain men, but I think language is important, but again, we should create cultures where it shouldn't be a barrier. And again, I think that is important to set the tone from the top, but also to empower and enable anyone in the organisation to get involved in these types of initiatives. We have a mental health and wellness ambassador program, which is we provide training, all volunteers. They're not experts, but they create communities in their own countries. And that's been very, very powerful. It's bottom up. It's not HR driven, but it's bottom up within the organization. Yeah, I think language and also approach is important here.
Just picking...
Go on, Mark.
So Nathan, thank you. So just picking up on that point, I think historically, we have brought men into a room and told them that they're biased unconsciously. We've brought them into another room and told them that they're aggressive in a micro way. We've got all the messages coming out around sexism and sexual harassment and everything like this. And I don't know whether anyone's read Caitlin Moran's book about a man, and there's a great section in there where she talks about all the good things about men, and then she goes on to say, actually, that could also relate to my dog, but if I keep telling my dog his bad, he'll do one of two things. He'll either creep under the table and be really quiet, and withdraw, or he'll become aggressive. And I think that's extreme examples, but I think that's part of what's happening in the language we use about men, that actually it's driving us in the wrong direction. We haven't got those role models, hence the rise of things like Andrew Tate, and a recent survey showed that we rate our best friend 29th as a great role model. There are people like Nelson Mandela and David Beckham and other great role models, but our best friend is right down at 29th. Maybe we need to engage men in a different way and start talking about it positively.
Excellent, thank you, Matt. There's a few comments in the Q&A actually about the recently published video from Norwich City. I don't know if any of the panel saw it, and just the awareness that brought, and it was very powerful. Any other examples you've seen in your travels of an organisation or somebody creating awareness to create a different conversation that you think is really powerful?
If it's okay, I'm going to actually give a shout out to somebody called Paul Mort, who was my coach for quite a while, and he very much talks about action over awareness. Awareness is great, but action is where change happens, and he's kind of the person that I learned a lot from about accountability groups, about kind of not focusing on the negative. So very often I think guys don't get on with talking therapy because it gets you to focus on how you don't want to feel. It gets you to focus on all these negative feelings, and that can be particularly destructive for guys, especially when you are using poor coping strategies to deal with those. And that's why not every male, but a lot of males don't get on very well with talking therapy. And so instead, I think coaching, particularly group coaching with other guys, gets you to think instead about, how do I want to feel? What action am I willing to take to feel that way? How can I build accountability into my plans and actions with the rest of the people in this group so that I kind of feel part of this group and we're all in it together and actually create that action and impact from it. So that's sort of something that I've learned a huge amount from, and he's not the only coach that does this kind of thing, but I just wanted to kind of say that, yeah, he's the first person that jumped to mind when you asked that, Nathan.
Excellent, thank you, James. And there's also a few comments and questions in there, people asking for some of the resources and where to go for support. So I think maybe on behalf of the DP, Lindsay, between you and I and Sarah, we can share afterwards some of the organisations and where people can get support across our industries if they don't have access to it within their organisation. We're coming to the close, so I thought I'd sort of finish on this sort of question. So from an individual perspective, How do you each manage your own mental health in this area? You're all facing into these challenges. You're all being brilliant role models across your organisations, across industries, but also you have to look after yourself. So, any tips for the fellow males on the call in terms of being self-caring?
Yeah, and maybe to kick off, for me, it's running. I find it clears my mind. It generates the endorphins, and it's my sort of coping mechanism, and it's been an important staple throughout my life. And actually, just to say that my eldest daughter, who went through her challenges, ran her first half marathon last weekend, and she just signed us both up for the Manchester Marathon next year. So we're going in the right direction together.
Excellent. You'd have to get the sponsorship form going around for that, Stuart.
Indeed.
Mark,
So like Stuart, sports. I play water polo. It gives me the opportunity to keep myself physically fit, but also get rid of some of that aggression sometimes. Bit of a fight in the swimming pool is always good. But actually through that, form some very close male relationships, people who we can confide in each other in a safe and open way as a team.
Thank you, Mark.
I think for me, self-awareness is a really important one, and learning to recognize when we're getting close to that tipping point that we actually, this is too much. I'm just going to step away for 5 minutes. I'm going to go make a cup of tea, walk around the block, or what have you, and kind of learning ourselves, how we're feeling, kind of acknowledging those feelings. Going back to what we were doing, kind of everybody, we've all got our own different strategies. I think I'm not a sporty person, I have to say, but cooking is probably my equivalent of running. I can't stop work in the middle of the day and go and cook a 3-course meal, but I can implement some of those smaller strategies that will then allow me to kind of get through the day and really be able to kind of relax and reflect at the end of that day.
Excellent. Sounds like we're all coming to yours for dinner, Dan, if that's your...
Very welcome.
I think for me, the one biggest thing that I do that contributes, I think, most to my my overall well-being is journaling, is prompted journaling, which I do every morning and every evening, because it then sets up the rest of my day. So it's not just journaling, right? How am I feeling? It's not a diary. It's kind of getting down what are the most important things I need to achieve today. How do I want to feel today? What am I willing to do to create that feeling? Who could I positively impact today? Kind of ask myself the same questions every day to make sure I set up the rest of the day really well. And then at the end of the day, kind of reflect back as well, what went well, what didn't go well, how would I handle it better next time? And recording down as well, key things that I'm trying to work towards as well. So I'll always record down, did I drink 3 liters of water? Did I do some exercise? How many hours did I sleep? All of that kind of stuff also. So I think prompted journaling can be incredibly powerful if it's used in the right way like that. How about you, Nathan?
Actually, yeah, well, I was actually saying, so when I mentioned I had a period of stress, and I actually used the writing it down technique, just how I was actually feeling, what was going on in my own head, taking a bit of professional advice, but sort of not about structuring my thoughts, but just trying to get it out so I could understand it. Nowadays, looking after 2 young kids keeps me busy. When I do get a bit of free time, it's a bit of 5-a-side football, which is a great sort of stress relief with some friends. Well, look, we could have...
Nathan, so if I may, just one final thought, which is what we've been doing today. It's sharing and it's listening. I think that's probably one of the most powerful things which I would encourage males to do. A problem shared is a problem half, as they say, the old adage. So, yeah.
Brilliant point, Stuart. Absolutely. Well, look, a huge thank you to the panel. You've been absolutely awesome sharing your thoughts and perspectives and personal stories. There is a lot of comments in the chat around, thanking you all. So a big thank you from everybody. There was just a few things that were coming into my head to sort of wrap up. There's something about opening up sooner and finding ways to do that. So if anybody's sat on this call, don't wait until it gets too far. It feels like mental health stigma is changing, but we've probably got more work to do. But we're changing the narrative. Networks are really important here, friends, family, but also professionally, and obviously organisations can provide a lot of support. Role models, I think, is probably my big takeaway, and big shout out to all of you for being role models here today. And other people that do it, both male and female, in organisations. And this sort of point about making it safe to talk. If you've got the culture where you can make it safe to talk, as Stuart brilliantly said, a problem shared is a problem halved. So I feel like those are the sort of really areas of focus. So huge thank you. I don't know if we can do a virtual round of applause, but I think if we're in an auditorium, you would all be getting a good round of applause. So thank you, everybody, and thank you for tuning in.
Thank you for sharing, Nathan, as well. Appreciate it.
Pleasure.